And we speak now to someone who's listening very intently to that, Jenny Manson, Jeremy Corbyn supporter, but also co-chair of Jewish Voice for Labour. Have I got that description right?
You have.
You're sitting opposite me and you were listening very, very carefully. What did you make of what Frank Field just said?
Well, I am confused as to his reasons for leaving, perhaps more than I was at the beginning. It does seem as if his party in Birkenhead have not been satisfied with him for some time. That's not bullying. If there's been any bullying involved, I'd be very, very sorry to hear it. But there is bullying on all sides. But I wanted just to say something about Frank. He was my great hero in the Child Poverty Action Group period of his life. What has saddened me very much about Frank, actually, has been his support to some of the measures that the Conservative government and the coalition have taken against people on benefit. So from that point of view...
is he bedroom tax? Is it that kind of thing?
Yes,
or?
And I wrote to him once on the welfare cap. I wrote to him about that once, and I know quite a lot about it because I work with a lawyer who's been challenging some of the cases which have been discriminatory against women, and some obvious, and I'm a tax inspector, and people don't take into account tax credits, but that's a very technical point. But let me just stick on the constituency. What the narrative that we seem to be seeing now is that because the Corbyn thing is so electrifying inside Labour, what's happening with right-wing Labour MPs like Frank Field, like Kate Hoey, is that they find that their local memberships suddenly get inflated with a lot of Corbynistas who are in there for one reason only, and that's to take Frank out. Well, actually, that absolutely isn't fair. The message from Mr Corbyn's office and from Momentum's leadership, John Lansman and others, has been, we are not in the game of deselection. However, we have got a democracy. If MPs no longer represent most of their Labour members, and probably not their Labour voters either...
but the second bit is to keep it.
Of course it is.
You can't get a load of Momentum people deselecting Frank Field against the wishes of the people who voted for him.
No, you can't, and that's why we always try as Labour members to reflect what voters around us are saying. But if you think about it, it's not a job for life, an MP, and it's an incredibly important MP, and I don't believe in deselection as some sort of plot from within, but I do believe MPs should be looked at as to how they're doing their job.
Okay.
But on to the bullying.
Go on.
Yeah.
Well, no, can we go on to this anti-Semitism for a second?
Okay.
Because Mr Field did say just then that we don't need to spell out what all the reasons are because the listeners know.
Well, I don't think the listeners have got a clue. There's been almost no factual evidence of this so-called extensive anti-Semitism.
Well, laying the wreath, he mentioned.
Okay. Well, I want to mention laying the wreath. I want to mention, before I forget, him saying we should listen to the Jewish community. I'm in the Jewish community too. I mean, I am a Jewish. There are huge numbers of Jews like me in Jewish Voice for Labour and elsewhere who are not represented by the so-called representative bodies, and none of them are democratic. And
difficult to ignore the former chief rabbi, though, isn't it, Jonathan Sachs, in what he said?
I want to say something, but I wanted to say something about Frank saying we should be listening. They have not stopped telling the Labour leadership how to run the Labour Party for the last 2 years.
They
I can
being
remember
who?
That the members of the Jewish establishment who purport to represent all Jews, like the Board of Deputies, Labour Friends of Israel, Jewish Labour Movement, they have been talking, and Jeremy's been listening. That's why we got the Chakrabarti report. That's why we have a disciplinary unit only looking at anti-Semitism. The wreath laying is a good example of bad news. Jeremy Corbyn, along with a Conservative peer and a Liberal peer, both of whom are now in trouble, I believe, for doing this, went to a peace conference and part of the activity of the peace conference was to have a wreath laying for people killed in the bombing of the PLO headquarters in 1985 that killed many Tunisians. Mr Corbyn had no idea what other wreath laying there may have been at the cemetery, and actually his staffers have checked, and there were no Black September people whose graves were lying anywhere near where he was. But he went there to lay wreaths for a particular purpose, and it was only chance, from what the Conservative peer said on the radio rather bravely, or was it the Liberal one, that he hadn't gone to the wreath laying too. There is too much non-news. I won't use the expression fake news, but I want to say something about bullying, but perhaps unless you want to follow
I just want to, we will at some point, I hope in this programme, say something about that subject, but let's just hear some of the voices from Birkenhead, which is of course Mr Field's constituency.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, Frank Field, because to be honest, he's not a Labour person, thank goodness. I'm not Labour either, and good luck to him.
Well, he's jumping before he's been pushed.
Well, I'm Labour, as I don't like the man. I don't like for anything he's voted for. Everything he's voted for, I've been against. So,
I would say, he's a good man, and he's good for the area, and he's been in a long time. So I think he should be all right and keep him as he is.
So what do you think Labour should do now, Jenny?
Well, I'm always hoping, and perhaps this hope will one day be realised, that the Labour leadership will listen to the Jewish community as it has been listening. When I say the Jewish community, these words have to be defined. The members of the Jewish establishment who've making particular overtures towards him and requesting him to listen specifically, to listen to the rest of the electorate as well. There is a lot of other people who are suffering racism, including Muslims. And I think it's very important the Labour Party takes the lead, as it always has done, in anti-racism. And I consider Mr Corbyn so prominent as an anti-racist and somebody who's anti-Semitism, that the shame and bullying, the humiliation of him.
So you wanted to make a point about bullying, and I don't want you to feel you didn't make it. So
no,
let's do
I wanted
that now.
to make that. I'm very sorry indeed, Frank, and anyone else who's listening has been bullied, but I've been bullied, and there's been a terrific upsurge of bullying, in my experience, in the Labour Party since Corbyn was chosen.
And that's despite the fact you support Jeremy Corbyn.
It's been coming, in my experience, from people who don't like Mr Corbyn.
We're talking about Blairites here.
We're talking about Blair, but it may not be specifically Blairites, but there has been an increase in bullying, and it has a terrible effect on a person. It makes them feel that maybe they've done something wrong when they haven't, for example. So I just wanted to say that all of us dislike bullying. And as a chair of various organisations, it's one of my rules that I'll never let anybody be bullied for their point of view.
Thank you very much indeed. Jenny Manson, Corbyn supporter, co-chair of Jewish Voice for Labour, somebody who thinks that Labour is being very unfairly blamed for anti-Semitism.